Hello and welcome to Indus News, live from Islamabad. I am Munib Hamid with the news of this hour. Let's begin with the top stories first. The United States says it has carried out a drone strike in Afghanistan, killing an ISIS attack planner. The US Central Command said no civilian was killed in the attack in Nangarhar province. It comes a day after ISIS claimed responsibility for the Kabul airport attack that killed at least 170 people, including 13 US troops. US President Joe Biden says China is withholding critical information on the origins of COVID-19. Biden's statement comes after US intelligence community said coronavirus was not developed as a bioweapon. Meanwhile, in Pakistan, 120 people have lost their lives to the virus, while nearly 4,200 tested positive overnight. Globally, the virus has claimed more than 4.4 million lives and infected 215 million people so far. President Joe Biden says the US remains committed to preventing Iran from obtaining nuclear weapons. In a White House meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett, Biden said Washington is touting other options if diplomacy with Tehran fails. Meanwhile, Bennett said he is happy with Biden's statement in a sign of bringing the gap between the Israeli and US approaches to Tehran. In Bangladesh, at least 19 people have died when a passenger-packed boat collided with sand-laden vessel in the Titas River in the Brahmanbaria district. Authorities said the rescue operation for the dozens missing is underway. News in detail after a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back now. Let's have the news in detail. The US says it has carried out a drone strike in Afghanistan, killing an ISIS attack planner. This comes as the death toll from the ISK twin blast at Kabul airport reached 170, including 13 US troops. As the US forces experienced the deadliest day in Afghanistan since 2011, President Joe Biden pledged the US will hunt down the perpetrators and make them pay. The airstrike the US conducted overnight in Nangarhar province, Central Command said no civilian was killed in that. Pentagon spokesperson John Kirby says the airport remains under the US Army, denying Taliban claims that they had taken over parts of the site. Now, Kirby said the US believes there are still specific, credible threats against the airport. The White House also said the next few days are likely to be the most dangerous of the US evacuation operation. The Pentagon said it has taken about 111,000 people out of Afghanistan in the past 2 weeks. A Western official says a swift passage will be provided to every foreigner to leave Afghanistan in the next 48 hours. Earlier, the US Embassy in Kabul warned Americans to avoid traveling to the airport due to security threats. Meanwhile, France has ended its evacuation effort, blaming the deteriorating security at the airport. Now, for more on this, we are joined by Arshad Yousafzai, a political analyst from Peshawar. Now, Mr. Yousafzai, thank you very much for joining us on Indus News. Now, Arshad, tell us, the US says it has carried out a drone strike in Afghanistan, killing an ISIS attack planner after the group claimed responsibility for the Kabul airport attack. Do you see further US strikes against the terrorist group in Afghanistan?
Yes, the drone strike indicates the seriousness of American troops, and especially after Joe Biden's statement that they are going to hunt the ISIS down. I believe they will carry out further attacks, and they have the intelligence and have the technology to do so. I also expect that the two enemies, the United States and the Taliban, might be sharing information in future, and U.S. having the technology, they might provide this valuable information against ISIS-K to Taliban, who can then further carry out attacks or action against ISIS in Khorasan, in Nuristan, Kunar, and Jalalabad, Nangarhar.
All right, now, Mr. Yousafzai, we know that now more than 5,000 Americans are yet to be evacuated from Afghanistan. Now, with the August 31st evacuation deadline, do you think the United States could complete its mission, or there's a possibility of an extension?
I think the U.S. is trying its best to complete the evacuation by the deadline. Despite the attacks on the airport, they haven't stopped evacuation. In fact, Pakistan was expecting 3,000 newcomers from Afghanistan yesterday. They hadn't arrived until late afternoon. But the U.S. seems serious, and they are trying to finish it as soon as possible. If, however, they were not able to do so, they might request the Taliban for an extension, but the Taliban have clearly said that they are not going to allow extension because they see it as delaying tactics. They have been claiming that, until now we know that 111,000 people have been evacuated, and the Taliban are worrying or wondering how many more are left there. The 5,000 could be evacuated in one day. But if the Taliban were convinced that it was a serious or genuine request and there was need, they might allow extension.
Right. Arshad, now the Taliban say their forces in Kabul airport are ready to take over, while the Pentagon says Taliban are not in control of any part of the military section of the airport. So can the Taliban take over the airport before the deadline?
I don't think so. Although we heard conflicting reports last evening, in fact, the Taliban shared some footage of their soldiers going into the airport in the military section, which was later denied by the Pentagon. I believe the Taliban will wait for the deadline, and they wouldn't try taking over any part of the airport because that would be breaking their promises or not keeping their word. So they will wait out.
Right. Let's just hope for the best now. I should use to say thank you very much for talking to Indus News. Moving on now, Pakistan has evacuated another batch of citizens and foreigners from Afghanistan. The evacuees landed in Islamabad on special flights. Islamabad has evacuated over 8,400 people so far, including over 1,100 through Torkham border. Earlier, Pakistani authorities seized a truck carrying weapons at the Torkham border from Afghanistan. According to customs officials, the truck driver was arrested and the weapons were confiscated. They said the weapons were being smuggled to Pakistan's northwestern city of Peshawar. Pakistan says it will continue to play its constructive role in support of the efforts to promote peace and stability in Afghanistan. Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi made these remarks in a phone call with UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres. Qureshi noted it is imperative for the international community to remain engaged with Afghanistan. The Foreign Minister assured Guterres of all possible support to the UN in the fulfillment of its mandate. Guterres expressed gratitude for Pakistan's role in facilitating the work and humanitarian mission of UN entities in Afghanistan. Earlier, Qureshi also discussed the evolving situation in Afghanistan with his British counterpart Dominic Raab. During the call, Raab thanked Pakistan for assistance in the evacuation of British nationals from Kabul. Meanwhile, in Pakistan, security forces have killed a terrorist in an intelligence-based operation in North Waziristan. The military's media wing said the troops recovered weapons and ammunition from the slain terrorist. It said a search operation is underway in the Spinwam to eliminate other terrorists. Earlier in Lower Dir district, a paramilitary soldier was martyred in a terrorist attack from across the Afghan border. The armed forces killed one terrorist in retaliatory fire. Now, Pakistan has reported 120 deaths from coronavirus over the past 24 hours. The Health Ministry says the death toll has claimed 25,535 lives. It said almost 4,200 people tested positive for the virus overnight, raising the positivity rate to 6.83%. The ministry said the caseload has exceeded 1,148,000, while more than 1 million people have recovered. It said more than 93,000 cases are active, of which nearly 5,600 are critical. Meanwhile, Pakistan has received 3.7 million Pfizer vaccine doses from the United States. Moving on now, US President Joe Biden has accused China of withholding critical information on the origins of COVID-19. Now, Joe Biden's statement comes after the US intelligence community said coronavirus was not developed as a bioweapon. Details in this report. Experts believe reaching the root cause of the pandemic, that is, the origin of the virus, is as important as developing remedies for it. But controversies and heated debates continue to dampen the efforts. President Joe Biden says China worked to prevent international investigators and members of the global public health community from accessing the origin. And U.S. intelligence community says it cannot resolve whether a Chinese laboratory incident was the source of COVID-19 without more information. Beijing has rejected the U.S. report as not scientifically credible, saying it wrongly claims China is hindering a global investigation. Meanwhile, Chinese health officials have advised vaccine booster doses for those who need to travel abroad where infections are surging.
In addition, people with weak immune defenses or those over 60, as they are at a higher risk of severe critical illness and death than other groups of people, are advised to have a third inoculation as a booster jab 6 months after completing their regular vaccination regimens.
Over in South America, Brazil logged 761 daily deaths and more than 27,000 new infections. In Mexico, though the daily cases are lower, the death tally remains high. The country reported over 19,000 new infections and 863 fatalities overnight. Meanwhile, Argentine prosecutors have charged President Alberto Fernandez with allegedly breaking a mandatory quarantine. They say he and his partner hosted a birthday party last year with friends.
The truth is that this was known because I made it public. I did not hide anything. They asked me for the list of people that entered to presidential residence during a year and a half, and I handed them the complete list. When they detected those 9 people and saw it coincided with Fabiola's birthday, they said it was a party. And the truth is that the party shouldn't have occurred, and I am sorry it happened. It wasn't made to harm anyone. It was a negligent and imprudent act.
In Asia, India reported nearly 47,000 infections, the highest in nearly 2 months, and 509 deaths overnight. Philippines President Rodrigo Duterte has extended the restrictions in the capital region and some provinces until 7th of September. Australia reported a record 1,126 infections, the vast majority in New South Wales, the epicenter of the Delta field outbreak. Globally, the virus has claimed more than 4.48 million lives and infected 215 million people so far. More news coming up after a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back now. President Joe Biden has reaffirmed the United States' commitment to prevent Iran from obtaining nuclear weapons. Biden made the remark in a meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett at the White House. He said Washington has placed diplomacy first to counter Tehran's nuclear program, but might turn to other options if the negotiations fail. While talking on the Palestinian issue, he reiterated support for a two-state solution. He stressed on refraining from actions that could exacerbate tensions. Meanwhile, Bennett welcomed Biden's statement, saying it can bridge the gap between Israeli and U.S. approaches to Iran. He said that Tel Aviv has developed a comprehensive strategy against Tehran's nuclear breakouts. Now, Israeli forces have injured dozens of Palestinians while dispersing their peaceful anti-settlement protests in the occupied West Bank. The Palestinian Red Crescent said it treated 33 people who were wounded during the crackdown. It says 2 of them were injured by rubber-coated bullets, while 31 suffered suffocation after inhaling tear gas. The rally started from the main mosque of the village of Beit Dajan near Nablus. Meanwhile, Israeli troops also clamped down on another protest that erupted in the south of the city of Hebron. A local activist says occupying forces also arrested 7 journalists covering the events. According to estimates, there are about 650,000 settlers in the occupied West Bank and Jerusalem. Now, in Bangladesh, at least 19 people have died when a passenger-packed boat collided with sand-laden vessel in the Titas River in the Brahmanbaria district. Authorities said the rescue operation for dozens missing is underway. Police noted that the dead include 9 women and 2 children. Officials said the boat was carrying over 100 passengers, adding that some of those swam ashore or were rescued. Earlier in May, at least 26 persons died in a boat accident in the Padma River. Now, the murderer of former U.S. presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy has been granted release by a California parole board. The state's governor, Gavin Newsom, ultimately will decide if Sirhan leaves the prison or not. The board's decision came after 2 of Kennedy's children appealed to release their father's killer. The local district attorney's office in Los Angeles has said they will not move to oppose his release. Now 77, the Palestinian-born convict was requesting parole for the 16th time. The gun that killed American Wild West outlaw Billy the Kid sold for over $6 million at an auction. It had been expected to fetch between $2 million and $3 million. Sheriff Pat Garrett used this Colt single-action revolver to take down Billy the Kid in 1881. Bonham's auctioneer said the gun was bought over the phone by a person who wished to remain anonymous. Bonhams described the gun as the most iconic treasure of early Western history. They said the price, $6.03 million, is a world record for any firearm. 21 years old, Billy the Kid was a wanted man in Arizona and New Mexico, killing 8 men. The gun came from collection of a Texas couple who amazed Western firearms and other artifacts for some 50 years. Now, scientists claim they have discovered the world's northernmost island off the coast of Greenland. The tiny point of land was revealed by shifting pack ice. The island measures roughly 30 meters across with a peak of about 3 meters. It consists of seabed mud as well as moraine, which is soil and rock left behind by moving glaciers. The scientists say the island's appearance is not a direct consequence of global warming. The discovery comes as a battle looms among Arctic nations for control of the North Pole. Several U.S. expeditions in the area have in recent decades searched for the world's northernmost island. In 2007, Arctic veteran Dennis Schmidt discovered a similar island close by as well. Now, the U.S. officials in Washington state have eradicated the first murder hornet nest of the year. Details in this report.
After a daunting procedure, workers in the protective gear were able to remove a hive of murder hornets near the town of Blaine along the Canadian border. The operation began with the removal of bark and decayed wood from the base of the alder tree. The workers vacuumed out 113 hornets from the nest before netting another 67 in the surroundings.
Here in Washington, 100% of them have been in dead or dying alder trees. Actually, this particular one was right at the base of an extremely rotted alder tree. I believe 2 of the combs were right at ground level, if you will. The rest of it, they had started to work up into the extremely soft wood of the rotting alder tree. And then, of course, last year's was 8 foot up inside of a pre-existing void in an alder tree. That tree actually had quite a bit more stability to it. It wasn't quite as far gone.
The species, also referred to as the murder hornets, are the world's largest hornets. They can grow up to 2 inches in length and prey on honeybees and other insects. They can conduct mass attacks on honeybee hives, destroying them in a matter of hours.
We essentially advise against people that are unfamiliar with the behavior of hymenopterans to get engaged into the eradication or the control of these very formidable hornets. I mean, the Asian giant hornet is the largest hornet in the world and can cause some very serious damage to a person who is not familiar with their behavior, or we really advise and strongly advise people to say, look, if you have reason to believe that there is a nest somewhere, contact the authorities.
The hornets are not native to North America, and the species were first detected in the United States in 2019 when a hornet was reported in Whatcom County.
And that is all for now. Now, for the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus Planting.